That's it.
Okay, well, hi everybody. Welcome along to the 2020 module of Mind as Potential. We'll begin as we normally do by doing a brief meditation, setting our motivation and preliminary prayers. So if you'd like, just make yourself comfortable in your seat. Relax as much as possible, but try and keep your back straight. And then think that all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all the Arya beings, the deities, the protectors, that they're all surround you in space. And in your mind, think that you're in the center of a great, vast crowd of living beings, sentient beings. And what you'd like to do is to protect and free them all from suffering and its causes, and to deliver them into the higher states of happiness. So with this idea in mind, we'll take refuge and generate the mind of enlightenment. So many of you will know these prayers off by heart. Those of you who don't, just follow along, or if you have your books in front of you, just open them up now and we'll take refuge together. So taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Now, to stabilize and enhance the wish to become enlightened for others, we will recite the four immeasurables together. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Now the next prayer, the seven-limb prayer, condenses all the practices into one prayer. And in brief, what we need to do is to accumulate merit and to abandon everything that hinders our path. So we sum this all up in the seven-limb prayer, so we'll recite that now together. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. Now we're going to make an offering to the field of merit in front of us. This prayer is called the short mandala offering. So here, there's a couple of ways you can think about this. One is that you're offering the world and everything in it, including yourself. Or you could think that you're offering your mind, your body, your eyes, and your four limbs, and thinking that this is the pure land itself where all beings can co-abide peacefully and take teachings in. So whatever suits your mind, use that. And the essence of this offering is to let go of clinging and self-grasping. So the short mandala offering. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Nirayatayami. So I think that the offering has been accepted by the field of merit in front of you. The Buddhas, Bodhisattvas all smile at you in delight. And in response to the smile, think that your own mind is blessed, meaning that all the changes you want to make, you're able to make. And your happiness is increased, your suffering is decreased, and your ability to help others has been enhanced. Okay, well, thank you. That's the preliminary prayers. So now we move on to the actual class. So this is where I do the share screen. Okay, so this is a 1.5 hour class that we're doing on the Tuesday mornings. And as Miffy said, it began in 2002, and it's like 18 years later, and we're still doing discovering Buddhism. I'm quite happy to keep doing that. So Mindfulness Potential is the first unit in the course, and basically it's sort of setting the ground for the rest of the units. So as His Holiness often says, we all want to be happy and none of us wish to experience suffering. And he says that this is really the meaning of our life. The purpose of our life is to be happy, lead a meaningful life, and to overcome the sources of our suffering and help others do the same. So in general, happiness is something that we all enjoy and wish for, yet it doesn't seem to last very long. It appears and disappears very quickly. Now, there are many forms of happiness, and one of them is called authentic happiness. And this type of happiness is very stable and long-lasting, but it depends upon we ourselves bringing discipline to the mind. It depends upon us disciplining the mind, we could stabilize the deeper forms of happiness. And I guess what this course is really about is sort of showing us what the mind actually is and how we can bring about that stability and what might happen when we do. So let's move along. So basically today we're going to have in terms of the whole course itself, we'll be looking at the person and the fortunate human rebirth, which is what we'll be doing today. Next week we'll begin looking at the nature of the mind, types of consciousness, and there are about 3 or 4 weeks just on afflictions and their antidotes. So I hope you find this the course interesting and are able to put some of the ideas put forward into your practice. Now, I've relied upon quite a few books and teachings for the information. So here are some books that I found sort of useful. And I particularly put these up. There are many others, of course, but these ones I put up in particular because that first up there on your left, The Words of My Perfect Teacher by Patrul Rinpoche. This here has an explanation of the freedoms and endowments, or the leisure and opportunity we have as sentient beings, but it comes from the Nyingma perspective, and it has, we say, many more freedoms and many more opportunities to consider. So it's a little unusual when you have a look at that. Steps on the Path to Enlightenment by Geshe Sopa is the presentation of perfect human rebirth from the Galupa tradition and particularly the Lam Rim tradition. The book called Wake Up to Your Life by Ken MacLeod is from the perspective of the Kagyu and Nyingma tradition. It's got some very in-depth meditations in it, and that's why I've put that up there. Turning Confusion into Clarity, once again from Nyingma Kagyu traditions. Yongey Mingyo Rinpoche is a very straightforward type of teacher. The writing is very clear and easy to comprehend, and that also has some very interesting brief meditations that are helpful. The other one here, called The Foundation of Buddhist Practice by the Dalai Lama and Chupten Todren, is a really succinct presentation of this topic, which has been written specifically for Westerners as a preliminary to in-depth Lam Rim study. So I think there's 4 or 5 of these books out now, and I would suggest anybody who's serious about the practice of Buddhism to buy those books and use them as a means to enhance their study, as a way of putting down a foundation for it before actually moving into the deeper Lam Rim topics by people like Geshe Sopa, or perhaps even your own teacher. It's very, very useful book. So I've used a lot of the material from that particular book in this course today, The Foundation of Buddhist Practice. So today's topics, we're going to be looking at these here: person, the precious human rebirth, and how to cultivate understanding of the topic and what we need to understand. So I'll tell us right now what we need to understand from this, what the purpose of studying this topic and in meditating on it. So I'll do that now and then say it again at the end, because I found it very, very useful to know why we're doing what we're doing and what we need to take away from the study. So this is what His Holiness the Dalai Lama says. He says, developing self-confidence and appreciation of our potential are the chief purposes of contemplating our precious human life. So developing self-confidence and appreciation of potential. Now the next 2 slides I'll talk about basically is the person who develops the mind. So in regards to this, Lama Atisha said to understand that there are 3 kinds of persons because of their small, middling, and supreme capacities. To understand that there are 3 kinds of persons because of their small, middling, and supreme capacities. I shall write clearly distinguishing their individual characteristics. And this is taken from Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment as verse 2. So in brief, within the 3 levels of being, small, middling, and supreme, the method to cultivate the mind of enlightenment and the activity of the bodhisattva deeds is contained within the supreme capacity. But to have ourselves capable of engaging in that supreme capacity, we sort of have to train in what comes before it, meaning, in other words, the middling and the small. So in training in the middling, we are trying to stop our obsession with the pleasures of cyclic existence and aspire for liberation. But to relinquish that attachment to the pleasures of cyclic existence and to, like I said, stop the pleasures, we need to actually train in the practices suitable for those beings of small capacity. So engage in the practices of initial level. And this is where this topic of leisure and opportunity comes into it, or training in the human rebirth with leisure and opportunity. So attaining liberation and enlightenment are the ultimate purpose for engaging in study and meditation. But to bring about those results in a single life is extremely difficult, but has been done before. So for our development to proceed smoothly, we need to ensure that we have a series of successive, precious human lives so that we can practice the Dharma continuously over many lifetimes. And to do that, of course, we need to create the causes for that. So those causes begin in the small part of the path, what they call the small scope practices. And within that, of course, are these practices of appreciating the life that we have as being rare and precious, this human life with its leisure and opportunity, and to sort of have confidence that we can actually attain these higher goals of liberation and enlightenment. Now here's the person. And you can see with this picture here, we've got on one side, as we know, like a person has a body and a mind. So Sem is relating to the mind and Lus to the body. And this term can is relating to how both are limited. As sentient beings, our body and mind are limited. And you can see how they're limited in terms of our conceptual thought and our perceptions. And in terms of the body, our spectrums of pain and pleasure are limited. And the way of defining the person or the sentient being is the I imputed to any of the five aggregates. So as you can see here in this definition I've got the sentient being or person is the I imputed outwardly to any of the five aggregates. So I put this word outwardly in there because this is how Khyentse Rinpoche, Geshe Tashi Tsering, define the person, and in particular is how the person is defined from the middle way consequence point of view. The general definition of the person is a sentient being is the I imputed to the four or five aggregates. Now, so all the schools of Tibetan Buddhism agree with this definition, but their meaning differs. So the other schools, when they say the I is imputed to any of the five aggregates, what they mean by it is that the aggregate of, the four aggregates that make up the mind is the person. Whereas the middle way consequence school disagree with that. They say no, in dependence upon the five aggregates. These five aggregates are together. There's called the person. It's called the person, or it is the I. They do this because if you search within the basis of the person, the aggregates, the person is not found to be any single aggregate or the collection of them, or to be something in between them in some way that is a substantial user of them. So the person is the I imputed to any of the aggregates, and the person is the being that has the body and has the mind. And basically this course is really about the mind that the person possesses. So these aggregates, the five aggregates, probably a word we're not all that familiar with. It just means group, five groups, five parts, five collections. The collection of everything physical is called the form aggregate, and the collection of everything mental is called feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. So I just pause here to ask, is there any of the students have any questions about this so far?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about, can you just say what the aggregates are, but you kind of explained that.
Yeah, so the aggregates, as they're described as the four or five aggregates of form relating to anything physical that we possess. In brief, it just refers to the body. It's a simple way of doing it. The other four aggregates, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness, we all put into the collection called mind. So we have a body and a mind, And the person or the sentient being is the I imputed to that collection.
Yep, that's clear.
Okay, no questions then, Miffy?
No questions. I just put in the chat, there's a picture of Eddie having a meltdown.
In my younger days. Okay, so let's go along now and have a look at the major part of the topics, the precious freedom of this rebirth, the human being with leisure and opportunity. So here we have a verse from Lama Tsongkhapa's Foundation of All Good Qualities. He says that understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once is greatly meaningful and difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. So I'll just say a couple of things first about the quote. This term here, found only once. So we can't take that, do not take that literally. Found only once is really saying it's so hard, so rare to have human rebirth with leisure and opportunity that it could seem like it'd be only once. So we don't take this literally. Dan takes its essence. So the essence is what we're really concerned about here, because there are a number of different types of essence one could take. The greatest essence, of course, is enlightenment. Beneath that would be liberation. And beneath that is rebirth as a human being with leisure and opportunity. So in brief, these are the three types of essence. In fact, at one time, I remember Khensa Rinpoche giving us a teaching talking about having the milk that we take from the yak, and you can just leave it as milk, or you can churn it and making it into yogurt. But what the Tibetans really love is butter. So we have the butter coming from the essence of milk, then the yogurt, and we just leave it as milk. Now this is from his Holiness from the Foundation of Buddhist Practice. He says, so whatever activity we engage in, whether it be mundane or spiritual, whatever we do in life, self-confidence is a crucial internal factor to accomplish it. We must have conviction and trust ourselves, believing that we can successfully complete the work. The developing self-confidence of our potential are the chief purposes of contemplating our precious human life. As we do these meditations, the conviction that we can definitely transform our mind and gain spiritual realizations will grow. So this is an essential understanding or realization we have to get for ourselves. Otherwise, you can spend a lot of time complaining about upsetting events around you. So, and consistently focusing on misfortune will prevent us from seeing the good in the world. So we've got to remind ourselves of what we are capable of, and this topic will remind us of that or tell us of that. And not every human life is a precious human life. A variety of conditions have to be present before this life can be called precious in sort of a meaningful way. So we talk about a precious human life. We're talking about the life as a human being which is free from 8 impediments and endowed with 10 fortunes. Now, there are a number of different ways of presenting this topic, and the way that I'm going to present it today is a little bit different than how it's normally presented. I want to try and present it today in the way that you would meditate upon it. So you'll see that when you read the Lam Rim material, it's presented in one way, but when you come to meditate on it, you do it in a slightly different way. So we'll be do it with the way that we meditate on it. And the way to do that is you begin with becoming familiar with the great difficulty of having the life of a human being with leisure and opportunity. And there are different ways you do it. So they go through the different, in terms of number. And so you consider the evolutionary time scale. Then they look at other life forms. Then they present different types of analogies. And we'll go through one of the analogies in the class. And then we can also look at the great difficulty that we have as a human being, of having a life with leisure and opportunity through its causes. So once again, as Holiness has said, that if endowment as a human could be attained and again over the course of lifetimes, it wouldn't be so bad if we did not use it and basically wasted it. However, human life is very rare. If we ask ourselves, why is that? It's because all impermanent phenomena are dependent upon causes and conditions. And the causes that bring about a life with leisure and opportunity are very rare and difficult to accumulate. And like I said, these are the causes here on the side. Basically, we need to have the morality, and this is basically the morality that abandons the 10 unskillful actions. We have to have an aspiration to be reborn as a human or for liberation or enlightenment. And we need to practice what they call the 6 transcendent practices. So here we just have generosity. So we need to practice generosity, ethics, to be patient, to engage with our practices and with others with joy. We need to have a level of concentration, and we definitely need to use our intelligence wisely. So none of that is particularly easy. As Holiness says, even when we think to perform virtuous deeds, we seldom produce anything of high quality. Why? The power of a deed, virtuous or non-virtuous, depends on preparation, execution, and completing it. When we consider the impediments to ensuring a favorable lifetime next time round, we see that it's very difficult to attain the state of being true practitioners in body, speech, and mind. In this light, it becomes very clear that this precious human life support system that we already have is difficult to gain and therefore should be used wisely. So now we're going to have a look at the great difficulty more in depth. So we're going to look at, first of all, in terms of the number and time.
Oh, just hang on a second, Eddie. With the how you said the 6 transcendent practices and generosity was mentioned, is that the same as the 6 perfections or a bit different?
No, it's the same as the 6 perfections.
So it can't just be ordinary generosity, it has to be perfection of generosity, or? No,
it doesn't. I mean, no, it does have to be the perfection of generosity, but we need to practice generosity. Yeah, the 6, what they call the 6 perfections.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So now we're going to consider like how difficult it is to attain such a rare type of life. So up the top, we'll look at the first one, and this is in terms of our numbers. So up here we have a dust storm. And it says in the scriptures that the number of beings dying in the lower realms and being born right back there is as plentiful as the dust particles on the earth. And in contrast to that, the number of those who die in the lower realms and then are reborn in the higher realms is equal to the amount of dust you could pick up with the tip of your fingernail. And they use this again and again. So like to go from the lowest hell realms to go to the spirit, the hungry ghost realms, they do the same thing. You know? The number of beings in the lower realms is as much as the dust particles on the earth. Then to be in the spirit realms, dust on the fingernail. Then the number of beings in the lower realms is as many as the particles of dust in the world, and so forth. So in other words, they're sort of saying, look, it's very, very difficult in terms of number to go from lower to higher. And of course, the number of beings living in these other realms is vast and outnumber those who have a human life with the leisure and opportunity to engage in practice. So, you know, an exercise, a mental exercise you could do, just to sort of demonstrate this to yourself, is to go like wherever you are at the moment, wherever you're living, just sort of think, I wonder if I just walked down the street and knocked on every door and asked them, you know, did they have the 8 leisures and the 10 endowments? If you knew what they were and said, oh, hello, do you have a spiritual teacher? Do you have faith in karma? A lot of those, you know, you'd find very quickly, no, I don't have a spiritual teacher. No, perhaps my senses are defect. No, I don't have any faith in the Buddhist teachings. You know, so even in our own communities, we might find that we are the rare one, the odd one out in terms of number. Now, in terms of time, when we do the meditation, we don't actually do the time one right now. We do it a little bit later, but I'll just mention to you about this number here and this person looking out into space. So this figure here is the number of years that make up what they call one great eon. So you might have come across the term in your reading, the great eons. Well, this is the number of years in a great eon. And they call them, sometimes they describe them as dark and sometimes they're called light. So when they're dark, it means that no Buddha has appeared to sentient beings. So I often say there's 60 dark eons can go by before a Buddha is seen in the world of sentient beings. And so although they pervade all of space and all sentient beings are known to the Buddhas, it doesn't work the other way. It doesn't mean that all sentient beings can know Buddha or the enlightened beings.
Eddie, does this time scale include previous universes?
Well, if previous universes have existed, I'd say so. So previous universes could come into and go out of existence, don't they? I mean, even right now, there's stories of galaxies being just sucked into black holes and disappearing.
Mm.
So it's very, very unusual to be alive when a Buddha has appeared and taught, and you know, and then you think, and that you actually get the chance to hear the teachings and then decide this is true and put them into practice. And you know, if you look at your own life in terms of the life of a universe, it's less than a blink, isn't it? You know, and then you look at having this life and when you actually came in contact with the Buddha's teachings. So for me, it was more than a third of my life had passed. You come into, and then it's like a third of your life already gone. Then a third of your life is spent sleeping. A third of your life is spent like eating and going to the loo and entertaining yourself. You know, there's not much time left, is there, to actually engage in practice.
Which, Eddie, makes the whole enforced isolation such an incredible blessing.
Yeah, well, that's what we've found, haven't we? You know, being in isolation has given me time to actually do a meditation and, you know, keep it going from day by day. So I have the time now to actually sit and practice and do 2 or 3 sessions a day. So we've got to make use of our time. These figures came from a book called, gosh, its name just escapes me now, but it's sort of like a book on Buddhist science, once again by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Thupten Jinpa, and it's been edited by an Australian ex-monk who used to live up at Chenrezig Institute. So this is how they do it. So in terms of the meditation, where you do the numbers here, then we'd have a look at the analogies, then have a look at what is it actually, what does it mean to actually, what is leisure and opportunity? You know, we identify it, and then we do the thing on the time. But I'll say this again, and so you can sort of know what's going on. So here we have one of the analogies. And Nagarjuna said, for an animal to obtain birth as a human being is more difficult than for a blind turtle to put its head through a hole in a yoke adrift in the great ocean. So make your life meaningful, O king, by practicing the holy teachings. So here Nagarjuna was friends with one of the kings of the era, and he was giving him instruction. And you know, he was sort of explaining to the king, look, it's very, very rare to have this life as a human being with a leisure and opportunity. You have it. Make your life meaningful by practicing the teachings. So I'll explain the analogy here. So there's something that might be, I know it's clear. So we're trying to imagine the whole universe to be like a vast ocean, and in it a blind turtle lives. He dwells at the bottom of the ocean, but every 100 years or so he surfaces. Meanwhile, floating on top of the ocean is a golden yoke with a small hole in the middle. This ring is carried every which way by the wind and the waves. So the Buddha asks his disciples, what do you think? Would it be easy for that blind turtle to poke his head through that golden yoke? So of course, all the disciples and we would say, no, it can't be easy. So then the Buddha says, well, you know what, the chance of that happening is almost non-existent. You could almost say it would never occur, but that's not true. It almost never would. So it's very difficult for this to happen, yet it does happen. So the metaphor, the vast ocean is samsara, and sentient beings are the turtle. And the blindness refers to our ignorance. We don't understand cause and effect, and we can't distinguish virtuous from non-virtuous karma. Most of the sentient beings live in the lower realms at the bottom of the ocean of samsara. The turtle coming up to the surface once every 100 years represents a very rare chance for a sentient being to be born as a human or a god. But even more rare than that is the turtle poking its head through the center of the golden yoke. And this golden yoke represents the teaching of the Buddhas, especially the Mahayana teaching, which includes both the Sutra and Tantra, of course. So there are other metaphors that are also useful. So I'll just mention a couple just briefly. So one is, if you can imagine, like a huge, huge, huge vat of sesame seeds being tipped out, and it's being tipped upon a needle that's sort of standing straight up. All these sesame seeds pour down for one of those seeds to actually stick onto the point of the needle. That's very difficult to take place. It's very rare, but that also demonstrates how rare it is to have a human life with leisure and opportunity. Another one that I like is the idea that you have a handful of hard peas, dried peas, and you start throwing them at the glass of a window pane. And imagine that one of them sticks there. So it's not likely, but it might take place. That's how hard it is for us to be reborn as a human being with leisure and opportunity. certainly something to think about and consider. So these metaphors are very, and analogies are very, very useful. They produce very good pictures in our own mind to discern for ourselves the rarity and difficulty of it in this case. Now, the next slide is the slide as it's presented in the Lamrim Chenmo that most of us are familiar with. So, you know, I think it's Lama Tsongkhapa puts it as an exhortation to take advantage of the human life with leisure and opportunity. So let's look at that slide, and I'll talk a little bit about how it's set out to study and how it's set out to meditate. So here we have the exhortation in the three major subject areas of the topic. So we've started off here looking at the difficulty in terms of the meditation. We look at causes and the analogies first. Then we move from there and go and look at the identifier. What is it? Now, what is the life? How do we identify the life of leisure and opportunity? We do that. Then we come back and look at the time scale. And then we move into its value temporarily, momentarily, and ultimately. So is that clear to people? This is how it is in the book as you read it, going from left to right. The meditation starts off on the very right, the rarity, causes, analogies. Then it goes to the identification. Then it comes back to number. And then it comes to temporary, momentary, and ultimate in terms of meditation.
Yep, very nice, very clear.
So the basis of taking...
Eddie, so sorry, which book? So you're talking about in the Lamrim?
Yeah, the Lamrim Chenmo, Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo. This is how it's set out in terms of your reading and study of it. But when it comes to meditate, it's different.
And then Mark asks, how can we understand the concept of the great eon, that very big number, with the approximate age of the Earth being 4.6 billion years?
Well, then just look out in terms of the universe itself. How old is the universe? This universe. It's much larger than the Earth, isn't it? Mm. Yeah. And this is only one universe. So in terms of the numbers, you'll see even in Western science, they're astronomical, they're huge. And the other thing, what makes it easier for Mark to understand is that, you know, so you might have been reading it recently where some universes have just gone out. You know, they get swallowed up by black holes. So in terms of the physical universe, there's no beginning point to it. Right? So in other words, like, you know, what we sort of know is that, you know, so far the presentation has been the Big Bang. Right? So we have this Big Bang, whoosh, this universe comes into existence. Then we call the Big Crunch is coming. Right? So then it breaks down again, and then woof, it blows out again into existence as another Big Bang. So this is how we can make sense of these numbers. Is that useful, helpful?
Yep, that's good, thanks.
Okay, so to take the essence of this life is to recognize three things: how special it is, how useful it is, and finally, how suddenly you can lose your life and how difficult it is to obtain such a life again. So the first thing we have to acknowledge or become aware of is that what we've already achieved. Right? If you've already achieved a life with leisure and opportunity, like it's been done, wonderful. Right? So it may, for all these analogies, go, wow, it's so difficult. You go, yeah, and we have one. Do you have one? If you do, like rejoice time, isn't it? really happy. Wow, something amazing. So you have to acknowledge that first of all. Then it's value. What are we going to do with it? And what are we doing with it? Because if we don't pay attention, we will not see the worth of what we have in our hands. And then the third point is to contemplate how difficult it is to obtain such a precious rebirth. So this is how it's presented in the text. Like I said, we meditate, it's a little different.
So Eddie, I'm just kind of contemplating here that I really hope I'm better at my human rebirth than I am at managing money.
Well, me too, Miffy. So down here, I've got this sort of section here called need, ability, and quickly. And so we need to, the need means we need to familiarize ourselves with this topic and then meditate on it. And we have the ability to meditate on it, and we need to do it quickly. Because the next topic in the series of contemplations in terms of the Lamb Rim is death and impermanence. And we know that this life that we have as a human being is impermanent. It's changing moment to moment without us having any control over that process. And in one of the books by the Dalai Lama and gosh, I'll think of his name shortly. But in that book, there's a lot of he puts in what they call booster meditations. So there are types of they are meditations where we really use our ability to imagine in different ways so that we can actually take advantage of the life that we have. I think that book is called How to Practice. Yeah. But yeah, we are lucky that there are a number of different books with many of these different types of meditations that are in them. So let's go along now and have a look more in depth into the identification of leisure and opportunity. So Arya Nagarjuna said, to be reborn with false beliefs, or yet as animals or ghosts or in hell, deprived of Buddha's words, barbarians in Buddha lands, or reborn dull and dumb, or among the long-lived gods. Of these 8 defective states that give no opportunity, you must be free. And finding opportunity, be diligent to put a stop to birth. So birth, of course, he's referring to uncontrolled birth, so that we keep re-experiencing samsara again and again. And these 8 states here, these 8 defective states, hinder our opportunities to practice.
Eddie, there's a question here from Alina
Yeah.
about, by noting the value of this precious human life, how can you compassionately help someone to be reminded of this whilst understanding genuine suffering they feel, the suffering around them, so not wanting to enable a degree of disregard for the gift of a human life whilst also acting with loving kindness?
So she's asking, how can we do that?
Yeah, how can you
Okay.
kind of compassionately remind someone?
Well, I think if you were reminding somebody without being angry or upset, that would be an act of compassion. Because I think, we do have many of people who don't recognize the value of being human and being alive, and they wish to put an end to it. So they, consider suicide, for instance. So I guess one of the ways you might do it is to try to question them and ask them, like, how are you trying to be happy? What are you doing to be happy? Because it's there you'd find the mistakes they're making. Right? So everyone wants to be happy, but very, very few people are. So why is that? The most common reason for this is that they're mistaking what the causes of happiness are. So if you could sort of gently point that out to them, and that they're not alone in this unhappiness, that most people are just like them, seeking happiness in the external world, seeking happiness through their senses. And that is a form of happiness, but it's not reliable and stable. Like it changes. So you'd have to be quite skilled in doing this, because if they don't have a Buddhist background, you're going to have to find language that is not Buddhist. And you're going to have to try and work from their perspective. So you need to sort of be very patient with them and get them to talk and tell you about how they're trying to be happy. Then depends about that, so then question them and ask them, so what's that actually produced? Are you actually happy, trying to be happy that way? And you probably find, well, no, my happiness is not stable, it doesn't last. And then maybe say, this is not an uncommon problem. This is a problem that humanity's faced for thousands of years. I've been asking this question. And there is an answer. And then sort of gently lead them into these teachings, but try and keep it, you need to check that person to see if they have a spiritual inclination or a religious inclination, and find the language that's appropriate to their present state.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so of these unfavorable states, these 8 unfavorable states, 4 refer to rebirth in non-human states. And although these rebirths are temporary, the person, while in that rebirth, is impeded for practicing for that duration. So let's have a look at some of these states. So here are the non-human states: the state of the hells, the state of the spirits or hungry ghosts, state of animals, and then the long life gods. So in brief, if you're reborn in the hells, the intense physical torment is so great you're unable to direct your mind to practice. Now there are different presentations about this. So one is like in the Galupa, it's like there's an actual state. We know there are animals that lived, and their minds are respond to that nervous system and brain and so forth. In the Kagyu and Nyingma, they don't talk about so much as actually and so forth. They really talk about the human psychological states of hell, hungry ghost, animal, and so forth. But so you've got to find the one that's suitable for you. And if you get one, it's quite possible to get the other 2. So you can sort of work between both. But like I said, with the hellish state one, just think of yourself, for instance, when you have a migraine headache. Like when you're in that state, can you practice any Dharma at all? And for instance, another instance is, most of us, there's this, the plague thing going on at the moment, right? Everybody's confined to their houses. Well, that confinement is making it very, very hard for people to practice. There are some people I know who are actually have taken refuge in the 3 jewels, but now can't take, not actually taking refuge in the 3 jewels. They're trying to find other means to overcome the hellish states they find themselves in. Right? So we could look at, once I'm saying once is, you could look at it purely from a mental state, or you could read the literature and go, right, these are beings on fire, or these are beings who are really, in icy states and so forth. The suffering is immense. And just, remind yourself that if suffering was that great, could I actually practice? His Holiness actually says when you do these meditations, is to actually imagine yourself in these states, right, as a being in hell. could you practice any type of Dharma? So this is where it's very useful to go to get a Lamrim text, look at the 8 different hell states of the and so forth, and think, gee, they talk about this one of like, you know, when you one of the ones I remember is like climbing up a tree, and then when you come down, it's made up of all these sharp knives, and you get cut every time you go down. Like, could you imagine being cut over and over and over again and trying to practice any type of Dharma? The hungry ghosts, so these are beings who are distracted from practice by extreme hunger and thirst, as well as by their constant search for food and drink, and their frustrations of not being able to procure them. So this, in terms of mind state, is the mental state of a person, an addict. So once again, when you have those addictive mind states, or like even in this world, you know, just hungry, so thirsty. If you can imagine yourself in those states and think, could I actually practice Dharma? What Dharma would I practice? Then we come to the states of animals. So animals here, one of the things for them is great fear, and also sort of dullness. So once again, imagine yourself as a different type of animal. So you know, I see on YouTube, I saw a little clip of a large, I think it was an orca or a whale, very large. It was alone in a swimming pool. It's been in there 50 years, just swimming around in circles. Or you think of yourself being hunted by other animals or in the jaws of another animal. What sort of Dharma could you practice then? And these long life gods, they're types of gods in the fourth meditative state of the form realm, and they have almost no mental activity whatsoever. So I mean, once again, this is one in terms of psychological states. This will probably be uncommon to most of you, but imagine yourself being really stoned and just feeling so good that you don't even think, you just feel good. And then over time, of course, it changes, and then you notice the state has changed. Well, the long life gods are like that. They know they're in this place of bliss, and over time it changes, and then they know suddenly, gosh, I'm not going to be here for very long. I'm going to leave this state.
Eddie, it's also a little bit like when you first go on holiday and you're lying there in the sun and you kind of get that dull kind of brain dead state that's finally the mental holiday as well.
Yeah, that's right. And then you have to go home. Yeah, so it's a bit like that, you know. So we don't experience these conditions in terms of the beings of these realms, right? But like I say, check your own mind. You'll find your mind actually wheels through all of these psychological states from day to day. But if we were actually born into this state, we would not have an opportunity to actually practice Dharma at all. So, you know, so if we look at it from that perspective ourselves, like we're free from that, and we don't want to have that. We also know that others are existing in those states. So from that perspective, we can have compassion for those. And, yeah, and just like for the question for the other person that I just answered on the last slide, if you know people who do not appreciate the life of a human being and wish to end it, you'll know that it's somewhere in here, probably hellish state or the hungry ghost. So of course, at that time, be affectionate towards them, extend compassion towards them. Remind them that the state will change. It hasn't always been this way. You know, nothing stays the same. And once those changes have taken place, you need to do something else. And even, you know, you can help them move from that state right now. So these are the first four freedoms that we need to be free from. Now, here are four disadvantages in terms of the human life. So, a Buddha has not appeared, that we find ourselves in a place with no Dharma whatsoever, that our senses are defective in some way, or that we hold wrong views. So there is, of course, much information about this in the different texts, and I think this is pretty straightforward, really. Probably the most difficult one is like the holding wrong views. You know, before we came into the Buddha Dharma, we probably held wrong views. Now that we're in it, we've probably abandoned or partially abandoned some of them. So once again, we have to we don't have to simply think of others being born in these states, but we need to imagine ourselves living in the circumstances ourselves. Then we recall our current freedom and then appreciate the excellent conditions we now have.
Eddie, can you just give an example of, say, a wrong view, like in colloquial terms?
Okay, so not believing in karmic cause and effect, a simple one that, you know, if you hurt somebody now, so what? You know, and just to go, oh, well, now if I hurt somebody now, yeah, of course, sometimes I'm distressed about it too, but you don't sort of understand it. You know, that distress, it could play out in a part of how you're reborn in the future life. You know? So you discount karmic cause and effect. That's the major wrong view at this, what do you call, at this part of the teaching. So karma does not exist, or we have wrong ideas about it. Is that useful, helpful?
Yeah, so if we're kind of just thinking, oh, well, I don't believe in karma, so it doesn't matter. Or
yeah, that's right. Or you could say, you know, we can't overcome suffering. That's also another wrong view, you know. Because, you know, the Buddha's taught actually suffering can be overcome. It's got causes, conditions support it. We rid ourselves of that, we could be free of it. So that's another wrong view, which of course many people hold.
Also, so defective states, does that mean like
Defective
mental
senses,
illness and brain damage?
Yeah, so defective senses could be that you are blind, that you are deaf, that you are dumb. You can have brain damage, yeah. So, you know, so we can engage in Dharma with, even though we're blind or deaf, couldn't we? But it just makes it's a disadvantage. It's hugely disadvantage to have no hearing or to lose your sight. I mean, it's not saying we can't engage in Dharma, we can, but it's a huge disadvantage, and that's what they're pointing out here. And we don't face that disadvantage.
Also, just can you do a clarification, Eddie? Jane says that she's very new to this. So does Dharma mean basically morality or knowing right from wrong?
Morality and knowing right from wrong are contained within the term Dharma. So Dharma has got a number of different meanings. One here is like the teaching of the Buddha. Another word for Dharma is truth, a place with no truth. Well, of course, the truth as spoken by the Buddha, where, you know, suffering can be overcome, there are causes, we can bring about the cessation of suffering and so forth. Is that okay?
Yep, that's good.
Okay, let's have a look at the next slide. Born human in a central land with complete sense faculties, not having committed the extreme actions, faith in the objects, when Buddha has appeared and taught the Dharma remains and is followed. and people have love for others. So here, these are the 10 fortunes or 10 conditions that really support the practice of Dharma and having a life of leisure and opportunity. So these 10 are divided into 2 groups of 5. So just as the other was divided into 2 groups of 4, this is 2 groups of 5. So here they are again. So being a human being means you have the human intelligence which enables us to learn, reflect, and meditate on the teachings of the Buddha. To be born in the center of a religious country means that the Dharma is actually in our country, in brief. It also means that there are ordained in that country.
Right. By ordained, you mean monks and nuns?
Monks and nuns, yeah. All faculties of body and mind function, meaning we have a healthy body and mind. The 4th one means that we, in this life, haven't killed our mother or father, haven't killed a being who's realized emptiness, have not drawn blood from the Buddha, and we have not committed a schism in the Sangha. So in other words, we haven't tried to break up the religious community of Buddhist practitioners. And last, faith in the Dharma means we have belief in things that are worthy of respect, like the teachings of morality, the teachings within Sutra, having faith in ethical conduct, concentration and wisdom, and so forth. So these are 5 personal endowments. So the next 5 we're going to look at actually come from society, and I've called them 5 circumstantial endowments. So Buddha has appeared, the Buddha has taught, Dharma has not degenerated. We can meet pure followers of the Dharma, and practitioners enjoy kind support. So we say a Buddha has appeared in the world. Well, he did 2,500 years ago, and we could also think that our own teacher is a representative of that Buddha, if not the Buddha himself. The Buddha has taught, well, he did teach, and our teachers are teaching us. So the Dharma has not degenerated. So teachings still exist, and basically are flourishing. True paths exist in the minds of living practitioners, meaning there are people who have put an end to suffering and its causes. So there is a living tradition of spiritual mentors who can impart the teachings orally and through their example. We can meet pure followers of the Dharma. So that's why I put this picture up with Geshe Tashi Sering, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And some of you might recognize some of the students who come to Langri Tangpa. They're also in the background here and in the foreground. So there are mentors alive, like-minded people following the teachings, helping us, and they're also benefactors. So there are people that help the ordained and support them so that they can keep giving teachings and live comfortably while doing so.
And also, Eddie, in a way, everybody who's here at this class is also a benefactor, because all the donations and the buying the tickets for the class means that Langri Tangpa Centre can continue to provide the Dharma.
Yeah, and you look at you and I, we're both students of Khyentse Rinpoche, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So, by us giving these teachings and you supporting them, we are we're beneficial to the teachings of the Dharma. So, excuse me. So if you find you have these 10 circumstantial, these 10 endowments, 5 personal, 5 circumstantial, and you have the 8 freedoms. And like I say, you do a little bit of analysis, you'll find you are one of the rare ones. So in other words, we, as being a person who embodies this rarity, we have the means to put an end to our own suffering and bring about the stable type of happiness we've sought throughout our life. And not only that, but we could help others do the same. So this is really something to rejoice in, to really appreciate. So let's look at the next slide, where Arya Shantideva says, so hard to find such ease and wealth, whereby to render meaningful this human birth. If I now fail to turn it to my profit, how could such a chance be mine again? So I think Shantideva also said, the time at hand is not for sleep. It's for diligently cultivating skillful, meaningful, positive actions and avoiding the unskillful, and the negative actions. And if we don't do this, when will we ever have a chance to do this again? So now we come to the sort of appreciating the value of what we have. So it's divided into 3 parts. Its temporary value, its ultimate value, and its momentary value. So the temporary value in brief is to achieve a rebirth state as a human being with leisure and opportunity, or in the God realms. Ultimately, it's liberation and enlightenment. But momentarily, it's to say, gather as much virtue and merit as possible while we have this life. Now, the wonderful thing I think about the momentary value, maybe I'll just have a look and see if I've got something. I'll say that later. Let's go through. So it's temporary value. So discern the difference between ordinary and authentic happiness and act accordingly. So I answered a question from somebody who was sort of new here, and I'm sorry I've forgotten your name. But this is what you could encourage anybody who does not appreciate their life to do. Discern the difference between ordinary happiness and authentic happiness, and then act accordingly. Most people aren't able to do this. In fact, I spoke to a friend of mine some time ago, and I mentioned about being happy, and she got quite upset and said, like, what is that? I don't know what happiness is. And I go, oh my gosh, perhaps, like all this time, and you're telling me you don't know what happiness is. It's possible to find out. Don't just leave it like that and go, like, I don't know what the heck that is. There are types of happiness. One is that we're very familiar with. It's called ordinary happiness. Find out how that comes about, and see also how we mistake that to be authentic and get ourselves into trouble. So if we can discern the difference, then we can act accordingly. And this is such a valuable, valuable thing to do. Its ultimate value, of course, is to achieve the ultimate goals of liberation and enlightenment. Arya Shantideva says, relying on the boats of a human body, free yourself from the great river of pain. As it is hard to find this boat again, this is no time to sleep. So he's saying here, look, develop a clear recognition of its value. It's a tremendous opportunity to achieve both temporal and ultimate goals. So in terms of the temporary value, I'll just say, I'll just take it back there. Its temporary value is for us, we can discern the differences between hedonic and authentic sources of happiness. We can stop being confused about ordinary or hedonic and authentic sources of happiness. And then we can act in accordance with the principles of karmic cause and effect. You know, we can protect ourselves from future harm. We can remove future obstacles to practice. We can create causes for future happiness. And we can attain a similar rebirth by practicing morality, generosity, and having the type of prayer. There's a lot we can do temporarily while we have this life. Now, its momentary value is that in every instant, you can realize that it's our attitudes that are the final arbiters, meaning the final arbiters between whether we suffer or whether we're happy. We need to remind ourselves that the quality of our life and the happiness and the suffering that we're seeking aren't found in external things. This is so basic, and yet it's so often forgotten.
Yep, people are very much resonating with this, Eddie.
Okay. Well, good, good. And I said, you know, with once again, the question before, if you could just help your friend to understand it's your attitude that you take towards what's happening that really produces the suffering or not. And, you know, this is not just from the Buddhist teachings. The Stoics knew this. People in concentration camps have realized this. People without any religious affiliations whatsoever have realized this. It's the response we make to what's happening determines whether we suffer or if we don't. So momentarily, you know, we can really make life meaningful. We can decrease the grasping and clinging to events and people as being true. We can really enhance the experience of positive states of mind. There's a great deal we can do from moment to moment. So what's so precious about this rebirth? It's this, to have the favorable conditions and the spare time to develop our mind through the study and practice of Dharma. That's what's really precious about it. Right? And we can do that momentarily and temporarily until we achieve the ultimate states. Arya Shantideva again. Thus, having found this moment of reprieve, if I now fail to train myself in virtue, what greater folly could there ever be? How more could I betray myself? Now, I remember when I first read this, it's really, it's like getting stabbed in the heart, because I realized that I was one of those in folly and had betrayed myself. And so, you know, that's sort of what has to sort of happen. You got to make a change.
So, Eddie, when you discovered this, how did you cope with it? And how did you kind of not just freeze and go all nihilistic, but actually kind of seize the moment?
Because I knew that it depended upon the mind, that my folly was dependent upon the way I thought. Because the way I thought, I betrayed myself. And I knew that, you know, you can change your way of thinking. Thinking can be changed. Thoughts can be changed. And I thought one way, and it was just suffering. It was terrible. And so I knew that, you know, if there was another way, and what that is to do the opposite of what you've been doing. How about we try that?
So there's a couple of comments. Ganga Rai from Kathmandu says, yes, you can also, then you change the results as well.
That's right.
And Sue has said, the moment you change your perception is also the moment you rewrite the chemistry in your body.
Yep, that's all true.
And Alina, there's also value in not resisting the negative emotion. I mean, the negative emotion of just recognizing that folly.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, well, when you do, it's like it has to be true for you. You know, you have to sort of look at what have I been doing to try to be happy, and then just, you know yourself truthfully. It hasn't delivered on what you thought it would, so you've betrayed yourself. You know, and how do you get? Just through thinking. So don't become, you don't need to get nasty on yourself or guilt-ridden or anything. It's just thinking, and you didn't know a different way of thinking. But now you do, and now's the time to bring these moments of reprieve. Now's the time to stop it. And the way to mainly do it is to like train yourself to think and speak and act differently in ways that actually do bring about the long-term happiness you're seeking. Now, to cultivate this understanding, so I love this, because this is the conclusion you finally come to. You have this precious human body, qualified by the 8 freedoms and 10 riches, in order to serve other living beings. So I should, what'll happen to you over time is that, you'll recognize you have leisure and opportunity, but there'll be the other thing you go, what do I do? Yeah, okay, so I want to be, of course, liberation and enlightenment, I'd love to stop this. But what do I do, like from moment to moment, living this life? What am I going to do? And if you're lucky, this is the answer that comes up. Serve other living beings.
So Anne's got a kind of a comment or a question to do with this, that so with the momentary value, our attitudes being the final arbiter,
Yeah.
is it also our intention, or our attitudes, our intentions? Is there a slight difference between the two?
You ask, there's a slight difference between intention
and our attitudes. So our attitudes being the thing that makes or breaks us. So I suppose this intention, then the ultimate intention would be this, to serve other beings.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, that's right.
So that's an attitude or an intention, or
no, that's an intention, because but the attitude will go along with it. Actually, when you look at how an action is composed, one of the mental factors is the attitude.
Yep, got it, thanks.
Okay. Of course, before this arises in your mind or from your heart, what you can also do, of course, is at least do not hurt other living beings. At least start there. Go, okay, I don't like to be hurt. I've hurt myself and been hurt throughout my life. Finally, I found these teachings. I will not hurt others. And I'll do my very best to serve others, to help others. So I'll give you sort of like a brief contemplation. So first, if you have leisure and opportunity, if you recognize that you are a person who has leisure and opportunity to engage in spiritual practice and make your life meaningful, don't waste your time. Secondly, persuade yourself to make this precious human rebirth of leisure and opportunity meaningful. Make your life meaningful. Then cultivate this recognition of you being a person with leisure and opportunity. as a necessarily preliminary practice for every other practice within the Buddha Dharma. Now plan to meditate at the same time each day. So each day take a moment to recognize that you are a person with leisure and opportunity. You're going to make your life meaningful and then rejoice in the fact that you can do this. Find a quiet place to do it. Bring inspiring objects or place inspiring objects around you to help you be inspired, to maintain your inspiration. And basically keep it simple. So I'll just, so now I'm going to just sort of like, sort of summarize here. So we looked at the person. The person was the I imputed to the 4 or 5 aggregates, or any of the aggregates. It is the person who has a mind. So if you have a mind, you can't be the mind. You have a mind. And this mind, with its human intelligence, within the precious human rebirth, is a means to bring about temporary happiness, momentary happiness, and ultimate happiness. Once we understand that this is possible, what should we understand from that? What understanding do we need to cultivate? So it's serve others, help others. In the very least, do not harm others. So once again, in brief, the purpose for meditate, to become familiar with this topic, to contemplate and meditate upon it, is to develop self-confidence and appreciation for what you have. This life as a human being with leisure and opportunity. So self-confidence and appreciation. So those of you who have the notes, have a look at pages 105. The heading is called "We Have No Absolute Beginning." And then on pages 128, there's a meditation on the perfect human rebirth.
Eddie, I might just jump in here and say, now that everybody has the notes online as 12 different PDF documents, it might be a bit tricky to find what pages they are. Some of them have those titles, but I did number the documents in a particular order, so you can probably go through and get a rough idea whereabouts it would be in the number of documents there.
Yes, I use those page numbers for all the documents, and that's why I put this title up there. So in case they're not there or it's difficult, at least you could find this heading, you know?
Yeah.
You have no absolute beginning and meditation. So we've come to the end of our class, everyone.
So there's a little bit, a comment here from Anthea saying, absolutely brilliant class, so clear and easy to follow, but the content is massive and challenging and empowering. And I concur, Anthea.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, be confident. We have the means to put an end to our own suffering and help others do the same. And appreciate that you're one of the very few people that have the opportunity to do this. And so let's take our appreciation for the class and the merit we've generated through listening and looking at the slides and thinking about it. Let's take that merit which exists in mere name and dedicate it for our own enlightenment, which exists in mere name, for the benefit of all sentient beings who exist in mere name. May we also repay the kindness of our parents through listening to these teachings, contemplating and meditating upon them. And also the kindness of our teachers and the lineage of teachers who have kept these teachings alive for us and have given us an opportunity to live meaningful lives. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here and engaging.